All right, now let's broaden this conversation out. Joining me to do so is former CIA analyst Buck Sexton. He's a nationally syndicated radio host with the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, and nationally syndicated political reporter Salena Vito. Also, we have with us Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Let's take what we've heard so far, Buck, and tell me what you make of what she has to say about President Trump, about the client list, about Bill Clinton.
Well, I think she's largely affirming what is already known and not really advancing the knowledge of the case at all, which is unsurprising if you look at the motivations that she would have at this point. But first, in terms of what is known and solidifying what is known, President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. There's no evidence. There's no indication. There's nothing whatsoever to suggest that President Trump ever did anything wrong with regard to all of this. So many of us have known that from just the case files and everything going back for quite some time. But she vociferously and repeatedly goes to that. OK, so people can put that aside now. I mean, I don't know how much more is going to be necessary for that to become. Look, there are people who will hate Trump and try to lie about him no matter what. But I think that's affirmed now in a way that we can move beyond it. She also says, essentially, nobody else did anything wrong. She didn't see any, meaning other than Jeffrey Epstein. She didn't see any criminal conduct that Jeffrey Epstein even did herself. There is no blacklist. Now, that's always been a shorthand, and people talk about a blacklist. What they really mean is people who were blackmailed. But, Will, as I was going through the transcripts, she says there was no blackmail. She also says, at all, of anyone, she also says that the money was made through high-stakes financial deals. What? There's some things here that just still don't add up, and I think we need further clarification on some of the points that she made, and I think that maybe that will be forthcoming from the DOJ.
So you're absolutely right, Buck. I think there are very legitimate questions about Ghislaine Maxwell's motivations and credibility. And in just a moment, we're going to be getting more into those deeper issues that accompany questions about blackmail and international or domestic intelligence. But let's stick with the names for just one more moment. Jason, I want to read to you now. We're working on ingesting this audio. This all just dropped about 1 hour and 10 minutes ago. But I want to read you now from page 265 of the interrogation from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. He asks Ghislaine Maxwell, and you're not, I think you said, you're not aware of President Clinton ever going to the island. To that, Ghislaine Maxwell says he never, absolutely never went to the island. And on that note, Jason, there have been a lot of questions. Obviously, the political focus has been of late on President Trump. We've heard Ghislaine Maxwell on Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with President Trump. But there remain a lot of questions about his relationship with Bill Clinton.
Yeah, this is a person in Ghislaine Maxwell that knows a lot about Epstein, that he has, erectile dysfunction, but, plays the part of Sergeant Schultz and can't recall anything that anybody did any wrong. That list may not be written down on some nice, cute spreadsheet, but it's in her head. And I wish they would just ask her the simple question. Well, then the people who visited the island, start writing down a list. If you're going to get limited immunity, you better start coming up with a list. And, you can verify whether or not President Clinton went to the island. Go ask the Secret Service. There's a reason. The Secret Service is secretive, but they're also law enforcement. And if there was a commission of a crime, they still need to answer questions. They shouldn't be bashful about asking them. And I think they should go to that direction. But I don't buy what she's selling at this point. She is highly motivated to say whatever she needs to say in order to get out earlier. But come on, there's 2 people that went to jail. Only one of them is still alive. And there's nobody else that did anything wrong. And you can't come up with anybody else who did. What were these young women doing going to the island? Playing hopscotch? Getting lessons on how to sing or play the violin? Come on. There's a lot more here.
Okay. And here is another big question. We'll go to you on this, Salena. The question that everyone has been asking for several years. Did Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide? She was asked this, again, by Todd Blanche. Here's that exchange. Do you, so you think he was, he did not die by suicide, given all the things we've just talked about? Ghislaine Maxwell responds, I do not believe he died by suicide. No. What do you make of that, Salena?
Well, I'm not surprised by that answer. This is someone that believes that they knew him well, probably knew him better than anyone else. For her to make that assumption, that's not surprising. You hear that from people all the time when they lose someone to suicide. That I can't believe they did that. Right? This is her version of saying that. So that doesn't shock me. The other thing I think is important to note, and the woman's name escaped me, but the reporter from Miami who had done such great reporting on Epstein has said all along that there never was a list. And so she kind of reinforced that. Now, to her other things that she said, like nothing, untoward happened. Well, she's just protecting herself, right? In that moment, she's in that bubble of self-preservation.
The idea that there would be a list does defy common sense for any common criminal. Why would you maintain your own evidentiary criminality? But to Jason Chaffetz's point, that doesn't mean there aren't clients. Just because there might not be a list doesn't mean there are not clients. And Ghislaine Maxwell could be put to the test on naming the names, creating the list after the fact of people that she saw on the plane, Buck, or at the island. And again, we are digging through this virtually in real time. I'm not seeing that here. I'm not even seeing Ghislaine Maxwell pressed on what are the names of these clients.
Yes, I mean, if you were to take Ghislaine Maxwell at her word here, and I think all of us, you, Will, and the rest of the esteemed panel are looking at this like, come on, we understand that there's likely a lot being held back or outright falsehood at this point, although it'd be tough to prove some of those falsehoods. It depends. This is, I think, a moment where we have to ask, hold on a second. If she's unmotivated here to tell the truth, what are we going to get out of this? And I think that's where you have to see other aspects of this trial coming together, because she's telling us that essentially the only criminality that occurred here was Jeffrey Epstein's, that he hid, that even she, who was so close to him, didn't know about. It's just not credible. It's just not credible. That part of it, I think, is where it most obviously falls apart. And as for the list or the possible blackmail list, again, I think this is a little bit, the terminology has become a stumbling block here. It's, to your point, Will, clients, people who were involved with Epstein, who were giving him fantastic sums of money and other things. And we don't really understand still to this day. He was involved in getting like large sums of money back. How? What exactly was he doing? This is all traceable. This should all be trackable. I want to know how Epstein made the money that he did. I want to know what the transactions are he was involved in. And that should all be something that the Treasury Department, the FBI can get access to, because in the meantime, what we're left with is Ghislaine Maxwell effectively downplaying this whole thing. Yeah, he was a pedophile. He hid it from everybody. Nobody else was involved. There's no proof of anything else. There's no blackmail. There's no foreign intelligence tie. Oh, wow, that just brings it all together with a bow for her, doesn't it? She probably wants to get out early. So I think that we have more digging to do. I think the DOJ transparency effort here is the right thing. But the reason it's on a Friday, Will, is I think there are no smoking guns. There's other places we have to look.
Well, Buck, you appropriately pushed the conversation to the deeper and more important conversation. The existence of a client list or salacious names who may have had relationships with Jeffrey Epstein in some ways has been a distraction to the deeper story of who was Jeffrey Epstein and who were the people around him, like Ghislaine Maxwell. Who is Ghislaine Maxwell? For that matter, who is her father, Robert Maxwell? Well, this all came up in this interview. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.